Hi,
Hello,
I'm Zach,
I'm Braxton.
and we are
From Old to New.
Now, today we're going to be exploring a film that I've seen many times, but this is actually Braxton's first time viewing, and it's actually one of my personal favorites
12 Angry Men.
Now, this movie was made in the 1950s, so it's an older film, but I've been seeing we get a lot of great reviews on our older films that we review, so I figured we might as well review this one. So the film general plot is it's about a group of jurors who, after hearing the case for a murder supposedly committed by an 18-year-old boy against his father, they now have to decide whether or not he's guilty or not. Now, 11 of the men are first absolutely sure he's guilty, but one of them is beginning to argue that he's not guilty.
And so it's up to this one man to convince all other 11 men that he is not guilty.
And throughout, now I kind of feel like this throws off the general format of court films. Usually you see the beginning of the case, what actually happened, you see them argue it out and see whether or not the system prevails. But in this case, you don't know what happens, and you're focusing mainly on whether or not they believe it happened or not.
Yes. So it's the whole movie, it's people throwing out theories of what they think did or did not happen based on facts.
Yeah, and reasonable doubt. I feel like reasonable doubt is very important in this film. It's the entire drive behind our whole legal system, where you have to be absolutely sure in order to convict someone. Otherwise, you're just convicting them because you just feel like you gotta do it.
Yes, and it's not just sentencing them to prison. This is sentencing them basically to death row almost.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the whole argument is over a man's life, whether he should live or die based on a crime that he did or did not commit.
But I also feel like another thing this thing explored was like the perspectives of how the jurors originally came to their initial decision. Like some of the jurors based it off of they just believed the facts. The other ones based on how like the jury or how the each court defended their case, like how the defense presented, how the prosecutor presented their case. They figured who better presented it was right. But also I felt like a couple of them also went on personal bias.
Yeah, they go hardcore on the fact that they were like, oh, he's a slum kid, there's no doubt that he didn't do it.
Yeah,
he did do it.
They figured he's just they figured that's his upbringing.
That so it was his upbringing, and he was pushed to the limit, and he committed the murder.
And so like throughout the film, we've seen how there are none of the characters, like the jurors, we don't hear any of their names at least toward the end. All we get is like some backstory on them, their careers, some aspects of their personality.
Yeah, it's very little on detail on the characters that you do see, but it's more focused on whether or not they believe or don't believe that this kid committed this crime.
Yeah. So as we go in, after the initial vote of like 11 of them not guilty, juror number 8 then Art gives his thing I'm not completely sure if he's guilty or not, but I just feel like we have to argue for the sake of him. I mean, he deserves the right to have a case.
Yeah, it's based off of the whole moral of I don't know that this person did it, but I'm not gonna say that he did it, because some of them, like there's one guy in there who's just ready to go to this ball game and he's ready to get this whole trial thing over with so he can go to it. But you have our main lead actor who is like, no, this kid deserves a fair shot, and I'm not gonna say he's guilty just for the sake of saying he's guilty.
And so he begins presenting evidence the weapon that was used in the murder was supposedly unique and couldn't have been fake, but he ends up finding one in a store where 10 other ones for $6. So that gives him his initial original doubt. You can't just say, if you say it's the only weapon, then it's fair to assume that. But if you find out there's multiple versions of it and anyone could own it, that's reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
And so eventually, he then's okay, we're gonna take a vote again. Anyone else disagree? If nobody else disagrees, I will vote guilty instead. And then eventually he does convince an older gentleman again, to vote
not guilty.
Yeah. And so throughout the movie, we're presented the case, like the facts of the case. In fact, I feel like we, as the audience, are like in the same boat as the jury. Like, you know, they were presented the facts of the case and had to come to decision themselves. But now we are viewing it from the perspective, we are in their shoes. Like, we're hearing the facts about this case, and we have to decide whether or not he's guilty as well.
Yeah.
Because, like, one of the arguments of the judge is that, you know, if we make this decision, since we don't know whether or not he's guilty, we might end up sending a
innocent man, sending an innocent man to death row,
or letting a guilty man roam free.
Yeah. So that's the whole cat and mouse back and forth with this movie is he or is he not guilty? If he is guilty and we set him free, then he could commit another murder. Or if he's innocent and we send him to prison, we could kill him.
Yeah. So in the way the audience is presented the same facts about the case, but because of like because of the multiple jurors and their own separate experiences, we're given stronger perspective and exploration of the details. Like, because we mentioned that the defendant was born in a slum, and one of them understands growing up in a slum, so he can understand like his upbringing, like certain facts about the case. Like one of the arguments was the way he held the knife and we used it to kill him. But this man, due to his experiences in the slum, was able to recognize that because if you had experience playing a knife fight your entire life, you would be used to holding it a certain way.
Yeah, and so throughout the movie, it's back and forth of like, oh, he did it like this, but then the other side that says he's not guilty would be like, well, then wouldn't he have done it like this?
Yeah.
And so it's just a continuous back and forth.
It's also consistent of them turning their own arguments against each other, because one of them argues like, you know, come on, these witnesses swore on the table that they swore like on the Bible that this is what they saw, but they made the argument, yes, but they could just be believing that's what they saw. They made themselves so convinced that they were right that they believe it to be true.
Yeah.
And they end up like saying, like, how do we know we can trust him? We probably don't even know what he was thinking, thus disproving your own argument.
Yeah, and they also bring up a very valid point that one of the neighbors claims that they saw or heard something across the street, but at the place that they were living, there's a train that goes by, and it went by at the moment of the supposed murder. So it was a chance of whether or not she did or did not actually see the murder happen.
And also, there was also a chance of another witness hearing the argument that supposedly caused the incident.
Yes.
And so, like, throughout the case, they're presenting, like, different things. Like, part of the case was going through the witnesses, like an old man who claims to have heard an argument and also saw the killer running down the staircase. However, he's eventually disproved due to the fact that a train was passing by him, so he couldn't effectively hear it. And two, the old man had a limp from a stroke, thus he could not have ran all the way to a door in 15 seconds. At best, it could have been 45 seconds to a minute.
Yes, and they also they do demonstrations and time themselves to prove their argument, to justify their argument.
Yeah. And eventually they reach a point where it's down to, like, you know, immediately they reach a point where it's like 6-6. They're tied up. All of them are just like, some of them are, like you said, there's one guy's like still want to go to his baseball game, wants to just leave.
Yeah, he just wants to go to his baseball game, so he's just like, I'm just gonna cast my vote so I can go on and get out of here.
But in those moments, there's like limited moments of, you know, there are little moments of actual, you know, agreement between the jurors. So like this moment, they were like, we don't believe you should just vote not guilty or guilty just because you believe that's what you need to do to get out of here. You need to vote because this is the truth.
Yeah. This whole movie is finding out whether or not this kid did or did not do it. And so the fact that this guy just wants to say, you know, he did or did not do it just to go to a game, they say, no, we're not going to let that happen. You need to justifiably give reasonings for your reason. You need to give reasons for your answer, not just because you want to leave.
they also brought up a number of, psychological arguments that I found interesting. Like they were arguing like, why the defendant went back for the murder weapon even though he had just killed his father. They argue that, he wasn't in his right mind at first, but then came to his senses, yet he was still in his right mind enough to remove fingerprints and evidence.
Yeah.
They also discussed the fact that one of the main reasons they thought it had to be him was because he claimed to be at the movies, but he couldn't remember anything. But they make the argument it's under emotional stress, and being in the same room as your dead father, and after he abused you for so many years, it's enough to make you forget that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were in that situation, would you be able to keep yourself together?
Probably not.
I'd be like, oh, yeah, I probably wouldn't. Eventually, they reach a point where it's down to 3 people, like 4 guilty, 9 people not guilty, and they make one final argument. Their whole case then rests on the fact that the eyewitness who claimed to have saw it through the train, however, through a unique, during like a period of rubbing, one of them rubbing their glasses, the old man came to the agreement, to an understanding that if the woman wears glasses, then she probably wouldn't have been wearing them while she was in bed, thus she could not have seen it through a window 60 feet away.
Yeah. And that's a very valid argument, I think, because it's like if you wore glasses, she wouldn't have been able to see it that far away.
Eventually, he wears down 2 more of the jurors until eventually it's just the juror number 3 who's been adamant the entire time. But I feel like there's a strong personal connection to him with this case. Because at the beginning he talked about like how he had like bad history with his son, like they got into fights, they haven't spoken to each other in years. So being involved in a case where the boy killed his father and seeing that kind of dysfunctional relationship, he sees himself in the victim's shoes. He probably wants to, this is his way of lashing out at his son for leaving. So he wants to take it out on him.
Yeah.
I also kind of felt that way for 2 reasons. One, at the beginning, they showed there was a scene where they focused on just juror number 3 looking at a photo of his son. And lastly, at the end of the case, he shows this is all the evidence you need right here, and it's the picture of his son. So, and he starts ripping up. At that moment, he realizes what he's doing, and he votes not guilty.
Yeah.
Eventually, they all leave and go home back to their regular lives.
They go their separate ways.
And the boy is let out innocent.
And that's the movie.
Personally, I've watched the movie a number of times. I felt like throughout the movie, I had to believe the boy was innocent. But do you believe he was innocent throughout the entire movie?
I mean, they do make valid arguments, and there is a shadow of doubt throughout the movie. But overall, yes, I do think he was innocent.
Yeah, I agree. So, since this movie is considered a very classic movie, it's one of my personal favorites. So I'd have to give it a 9 or a 10 out of 10, at least.
Yeah, I'd give it a 8 or a 9.
Yeah.
So that's 12 Angry Men.
Thanks for watching our video. If you want to check out more content, check out our other videos and subscribe to our channel. We'll see y'all later.
Peace.
Peace.